Okay, people, let's turn to page 2 of our packet. We're going to talk about percentiles. Now, percentiles are the second type of measures of position in section 3.3. Percentiles divide the data set into 100 equal groups. Now, theoretically, we could construct a list of percentiles by using a number line. We always start with the lowest value. We measure off 1%. Any data value that falls within that interval of 1% will be in the first percentile, and we can repeat that process. However, this can prove too cumbersome and difficult to work with, so we will be using a formula to calculate our percentiles. Okay. And just remember, whenever we're given a data set, we should always put the data values in numerical order. So the formula for percentiles is the following. We just basically count the number of values below the data value that we're trying to find the percentile for, add 0.5, divide by the total number of values, and then multiply by 100. Finally, we will round the percentile to a whole percentile. Let's take a look at an example. So let's assume that we're given a data set that consists of the time people spend in minutes commuting to school. And we want to see the percentile ranking for 24 and 38. Step 1 is we place the data values in numerical order. Step 2 is we now will apply our formula. So we're going to we're going to determine the percentile for the number 24. So we have to count the number of values that are below 24. It turns out there's only one. Also, there's 10 data values in our data set. So we're going to insert those numbers into our formula and then use our order of operations to calculate, and we end up with the number 15. So 24 is in the 15th percentile. For 38, we just count the number of values below 38. It turns out that there's 7, and we still have 10 data values, so we insert those numbers into our percentile formula and compute, and using our order of operations, we should end up with 75, so the data values are in the 70, or 38 is in the 75th percentile. We have some problems on page 3 for you to work on your own, so you can pause the video and go back to your packet and work on these problems. Later on, we'll check the answers. Okay. The second part of percentiles is reversing the process. Now you're going to be given a percentile and you need to find the data values. And remember, step 1 is always to start by arranging the data values from lowest to highest. However, now we're going to apply a new formula. It's C equal to N times P over 100. Think of C as just how many spaces we're going to count. N is still the total number of data values, but P is now your percentile. Okay. When we perform this computation, if C is a whole number, then we have to find the midpoint of those data values that are located in the C and C plus first locations. Okay. However, if C is not a whole number, so it's some type of decimal or fraction, then we round it up to the next whole number, and then that whole number that we now compute will count C spaces to determine the data value that we're looking for. So let's go ahead and work out an example. Okay, let's assume that we have some data values that have been given. They've been collected. Basically, they're the whole dollars of the amount of money spent on junk food for a study session. And we want to find those data values that are in the 50th and 85th percentiles. Now remember, step 1 is to take the data set and to place them into numerical order. And I've done that for you, everyone here. Our next step is we need to find the data value in the 50th percentile. So when we compute C, P will be equal to 50 and N will be equal to 10 because we have 10 data values. We insert that into our formula for C, and we come up with the whole number 5. So that means that we're going to have to count 5 spaces and write down that number. It's going to be 13. So if you count 5 spaces, we get the number 13 in that spot. And we count 1 extra space, and we see that 14 is in that extra space. Now we're going to find the midpoint of those two values. So 13 plus 14 divided by 2 is 13.5. 13.5 is the value in the 50th percentile. Now if we go back to the previous 2 sections, and we needed to find the median of our data set, we would see that we would still, since we have an even number of data values, we would take the midpoint of 13 and 14 to get 13.5. So just remember that the median of any data set is always in the 50th percentile. Now we're going to determine the data value in the 85th percentile. So once again, we're going to compute C. P is 85, N is 10. We plug that into our formula and we calculate 8.5. 8.5 is not a whole number. Thus, we have to round it upwards to 9. So that means we are going to count 9 spaces to determine our data value. So if you count 9 spaces, we'll end up with 22. And so 22 is in the 85th percentile. Continuing with the packet, go to page 5 and work out the 2 examples using this reverse process to find the data values for the given percentile. And we'll go over the answers in a little while. Thank you very much.